yeah, this is going to be the foundation for everything you're going to need for nursing school and probably once you get out into the real world. So please pay attention to this. If you can get the anatomy down, this is probably one of the more, I don't want to say complicated classes, but it is such a broad topic that it really does take some effort to learn it. The wording and everything is a little bit unique, so we're going to start off today with kind of going into pretty much just the regions and how we separate out the body so you can kind of understand the language of anatomy, and we'll start to build on it. But don't worry, if you can order at Starbucks, you have this down. Okay, so if you can speak that, you can speak, well, anatomy. So let's just jump right into it. So first off, anatomy gets divided into several different things. We have our external structures, these are the things that we can see, our nail beds, our hands, palms, things like that. Internal is going to be the stuff inside. So the outer portion is what makes us all look nice and strong and pretty and handsome and all that good stuff. The inside stuff is where we get a little bit nasty and dirty, but that's the functional part, and that is actually where you're going to make your living, unless you go into cosmetics. And then we're going to start talking about the relationship between these body parts. You are going to need to get your license for CPR. CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Cardio is heart, pulmonary is lungs. So that's the relationship between the heart and lungs, right there. Observation of the human body. By the time I'm done with you, you're going to be walking around. You're going to look at everybody, how they walk. You're going to be looking at everybody and judging them. This is okay, though, because this is Los Angeles. We're already judgy, but now you're going to be looking at them from like a healthcare standpoint. And the anatomy basically tells you how whether physical functioning. Okay, if somebody is, breathing really heavy and they have like pursed lips breathing, or they have like a little bit of bluish color into their lips or their fingers during surgery, that's kind of cyanosis. They're not getting enough oxygen. So this is anatomy. This is your introduction. It's going to be fun. Physiology, we're not really touched on this. You're going to have another class about that. But anatomy is structure. Physiology is how those structures work. Now, of course, we have to go all the way down to the microscopic. So cytology is the study of cells. So cytology, ology just means study of. Cyto is like cells, so cytology, study of cells. Histology is now when those cells come together, they actually form tissues. Okay. Next slide tells you a lot more. So here's how everything starts. We start off with atoms. Two atoms come together and they form a molecule. The molecules start to come together and they form cells. Cells start to come together and they form tissues. So different kinds of cells come together and form one tissue. The tissues come together and they form an organ. Sort of like your pancreas has several kinds of tissues in there. It has a lot of endocrine. Endocrine means that it releases it into the blood. Exocrine means it's exiting. Even though your pancreas is inside, it's exiting because it has digestive juices that are as your intestines mixed with your food, and yes, some of it's going to exit your body as part of anatomy too, or physiology. Okay, so that's an organ. Now the organs are going to come together and they're going to make an organ system. Your pancreas is part of your digestive system. Those systems come together and they make an organism. That's a human, that's an animal. So we're all an organism or a collection of all these things. Now in the gross anatomy, that is kind of just what we can easily see with our eyes. So surface anatomy, that's pretty much just like markings and stuff like that. All you ladies, you want to have that little V, that little line that goes down. You don't even know what it's called. It's referred to as an inguinal crease. So the inguinal crease actually goes from the inguinal canal and it separates out. So we have some muscle structures of your stomach, which you're aware of those because you want us to have this, the flat abs and that crease and all those other bumps that go on down there. Problem is, most of you wind up with a guy who's shaped more like an O rather than that. But those are your superficial surface anatomy. What the inguinal crease does is it goes down to your inguinal canal. The inguinal canal actually has some of your arteries and veins and your spermatic cord for the men that come out of there, and we'll talk about that later on. Regional is just, head and neck is a region. The back where your meninges are and everything like that, that is going to be where your brain and your spinal cord is. Systemic is just systems. We'll go into all that stuff as we move on. You get tired of all the systems. Okay. This is just a real big thing of surface anatomy, kind of just telling you where things are. A lot of this is pretty easy. We can't say armpit anymore. It's the axilla. Works out though because we're at the axillary nerves. Axilla goes to the brachium. Brachium is the upper arm. Antebrachium is the forearm. All those fun things. The one I always like is going to be the mental, because it's where you put your hand up here and you kind of think. That's your chin. Some of us actually have that little butt there. That's the little cleave. So the butt chin is on the mental aspect of your face. When you get bigger, cephalic is your head. So it's going to be your face and your head. The Zika virus, what that does is it actually gets through the placental barrier and gets into the developing embryo. And one of the things it does is microcephaly. So when they grow, their heads are like really tiny compared to their bodies, and their brain doesn't develop either. We'll get into that when we go into microbiology. But micro means small, cephalic is the face and the head. Okay, developmental anatomy, that's just how things change over time. Embryology, you have to realize we started off as mom and dad come together, boom, they start to make a blastocyst. So now we start to develop. As that's bouncing down the fallopian tube, it hits the uterus and it embeds in the wall. And next thing you know, we start to grow a bambino. Now the thing about it though is as it's growing, we have this little ball of blastocyst and it kind of folds on itself and looks like a donut. The whole of that donut is going to become your brain and spinal cord, and then that wraps around and it starts to form the anterior cavities. All those things have different names. We're not going to go into too much embryology, but that's kind of the fun part. Don't worry about comparative anatomy. We're going to focus on humans. Comparative would be comparing, a human to a pig. A lot closer than you think. We actually can take thyroid hormone from pigs and use that because it's so close to our own thyroid hormone. It's something called armor. Clinical is just kind of how things change during pathology. Like hepatomegaly is going to be where your liver becomes large. Megaly means large. Your liver cells are hepatocytes. So hepatomegaly just means the cells from your liver got really large. Surgical anatomy. The one thing about that is a surgeon can actually look and see a marking on you and know what is right underneath. I'll go into a little bit of landmarks, but not too much. Radiographs, don't worry about that. That's nothing more than, X-rays, ultrasounds. Cross sections are fun. We've all seen MRIs and stuff like that. It's always entertaining. Let me see. Okay, what I want you to understand is at the molecular level of how we're made up of nothing more than elements. So we're made up of elements, carbohydrates, those are our sugars. Our proteins, they're going to basically be our amino acids. Lipids are our fats, and the main thing is going to be water. If you think about it, we are 66% water, 20% protein. You can read all that, but we're basically nothing more than our makeup is just a protein shake in the morning. Okay, you want to make sure you have plenty of nutrients in there. So that's going to be all of your electrolytes and all that fun stuff, which all comes together. So here's our electrolytes. Then our trace elements right down here. These are all the things that make up our body. If you have too much of any of these, you can have a problem. Don't have enough of any of these, you can have a problem. These guys right here are your electrolytes, your calciums, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, chlorine, manganese. Those things are electrolytes. What they mean is they can carry a charge. Now, it is the movement of those charges that actually give us an electrical impulse so our nerves can fire. If you think about it, though, most people don't even know what an electrolyte is. But you feel obligated to pay that extra money to go get yourself your Gatorade, your Propels, your energy drinks, and all that stuff because it says it has electrolytes in it. Don't even know what they are, but it's worth an extra $1.50 over at the mini mart. Okay, this is going into the organ systems. We'll hit all of these as we go throughout this class, so I don't want to jump on this too much because we'll get into every individual one. Metabolism, I just want you to understand, metabolism is going to be the breaking down and building up of something. So anabolism is building up. You go to the gym when they open up again, and you'll see the guys in there that are, on steroids. What they're using is anabolic steroids to make their muscles build up. If we don't use those muscles, they'll go through something called catabolism, where they start to break down. So if you build up those muscles, you get them all nice and big, and then you don't work out for a while, and all of a sudden they break down. That's a catastrophe. Catabolism. Anabolism, they want to look like an animal, and then it breaks down. Absorption is just bringing the material into the body. every time you eat, what you're doing is you're breaking down your food into its basic elements, and you absorb those through your digestive system. So now they become part of you. Respiration, you know that's just breathing, inhaling, exhaling, and excretion is the removal of waste. We're familiar with excretion through our skin, sweat. When you breathe, you exhale, you're going to be breathing out carbon dioxide and some waste, some removal of waste. That's why when the police actually have to do a breathalyzer, it can register how much alcohol is on you because your body is trying to excrete that alcohol. The other excretion is urination and defecation. Okay, so now this is just digestive system. We're going to go through all these. So I don't want to spend too much time on this because we'll go through each one individually. But I want you to know it's there so you can easily go back to chapter 1 as you're studying, and you'll see just the basic outline of some of our, more of our systems. Okay, language of anatomy, they're going to use languages that are dead. I think that Latin died because it was too hard. Now, with that being said, you're going to have to learn some of these Latin words. A lot of them have prefixes, a main word, and then a suffix. And then just to sound even more intelligent, we'll throw an O. When it comes to medicine, whenever there's an O, that just means like, oh, we don't know how to make the sound right, so we're going to use this O to combine it. So like a gastroenterologist. Gastro is stomach. Entero means the digestive system. Ologist means he studied that. Okay? So a gastro, the O is just combining gastric, which is stomach, entero, which is the nervous system that controls our entire digestive system. But a gastroenterologist sounds a lot more intelligent than a belly nerve doctor. All right, so anatomical position. Let's jump into this really quick. Okay, so now we have to start going into more of like, to understand the language, we have to understand orientation first. So anatomical position is always going to be the easiest thing, but it's the hardest thing to actually, when you're stressed or in a test, to remember. Because in anatomical position, our palms are just facing out, our knees, they're not together, not knock-knee, they're just comfortable. Our feet have like a natural flare, arms go down, and your head's looking forward. So this is your anatomical position. In this position, the anterior is going to be your face. Posterior is going to be your behind. Now we're going to break it off into superior and inferior. And these are all in relation to something. Okay, like for your heart, your head is superior to your heart, whereas your butt is inferior to your heart. So you understand that. It's superior and inferior, it's anterior and posterior. Then we're going to have our laterals. So right lateral, left lateral. From this position, though, we're always talking about the patient's right, the patient's left. We're not talking about yours. So you have to get used to that. That's where people make a mistake. Because they'll go to listen to the aortic valve, and they know it's on the right side, and then they go over to the patient and they go put it on their right side to say aortic. Watch out for that during the test. Okay? But we always go with the anatomical position. It's going to be normally standing. But during surgery, they're going to be laying on their back. When you're on your back, you're going to be supine. If you're laying on your stomach, you're going to be prone. So that's going to be your anatomical positions. Now, moving down. Hold on a second. So, okay. There we go. So, all right. Once again, this is just the same thing, anatomical position, according to the patient. Okay. And now we're going to go one more. Okay. And that's just a little better drawing of anatomical position. And that's the regions. This is what I care about. So now we're going to our anatomical regions. This is where we're going to actually be getting into what you need to know. Let's say somebody comes in and they have pain in the right lower quadrant. Now, our abdomen is going to be where our rib cage ends. So it's going to be like our abdomen right up here. We take it from our abdomen, and our pelvic is where we put our hips together and our hands come over. So it goes almost right to our belly button. And then so that's our abdomen, and then our pelvic area goes down. So we call all this our abdominal pelvic region. And we're going to split that up really into quadrants. We're going to draw a line right through your belly button, and we're going to cross your belly button. But now it's called an umbilicus. Kind of takes the sexiness out of it, even if it is pierced. So your umbilicus is our belly button. We're going to have a vertical and a horizontal line. Everything on the right upper is going to be the right upper quadrant. Then we're going to have our left upper quadrant, our right lower quadrant, and our left lower quadrant. If somebody comes in and they have like pain right down in this area, then they're going to say, it's going to be right lower quadrant pain. If there's a fever and the pain is really precise in a certain area, what we're talking about now is usually going to be the appendix, because the appendix is in the right lower quadrant. How you doing there, buddy? You got to have your emotional support animal to help you when it comes to studying and teaching. That is my cat Mo, who decided to help out. So that's your abdominal pelvic region. So this is just for those of you that are this is a good study guide. Kind of gives you all of our major areas, okay? I would say study this on your own because we have to go through this kind of quick. So let's move on down. So these are all your major regions. So this is just a nice picture of what's going to be showing our abdominal. There we go. So as we split it up, we have what? According to the patient, right upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, left upper quadrant, left lower quadrant. We'll go into what's in those areas in a little bit, because right upper quadrant is going to have the majority of your liver. So if you have hepatitis, we have a lot of pain in that area. It has our gallbladder. So you go and you eat yourself those animal fries over at In-N-Out, and you get some cramping pain right in that area. That could be gallbladder. Our stomach's going to empty out of there, and our duodenum goes into there. So that's going to be the major portions that are in our right upper quadrant, along with our ascending and transverse colon. Going down into our right lower quadrant, we're going to mainly have our small intestines, our large intestines. That's where our appendix is. That's the main player in that area. Coming over here into the left upper quadrant, now we're talking about another portion of our stomach. We're going to have the main portion of our pancreas in there. Our spleen is going to be in the back. Transverse colon, so small intestine, descending colon. In the lower quadrants, we're going to have our left portion of our bladder, right portion of our bladder. Female, you're going to have ovaries, right ovary, left ovary in the lower. Left lower quadrant, that's pretty much just going to be our, not really a whole lot there, okay? Ovaries, then it's going to be where our colon comes down, it goes into our sigmoid colon. So sigmoid colon, small intestine, large intestines. Okay. For those that are really detail-oriented, now we're going to break it up into regions. Now in our regions, we have our epigastric. Epi is above, so above the stomach. We have our epigastric. And we have our hypochondriac. Chondriac is chondrocytes that make up the cartilage of our ribs. So we're going to have our left hypochondriac section and our right hypochondriac section. Then we're going to go in and we're going to have our umbilical region, because I told you, umbilical cord. So going over, we're going to have our right umbilical region, and also called our lumbar, because it goes to our lumbar section here, and our left lumbar, our umbilical. Going down, inguinal region, our hypogastric below our stomach. So those are all pretty simple. Let's see. We already talked about anterior, superficial. Okay, so superior and inferior. Superior is above, inferior is below. Anterior is front or ventral. When somebody gets mad and they want to vent, so they're going to vent their anger, it comes out their mouth towards you. So it goes forward, okay? Dorsal is going to be towards the back, like a dorsal fin on a fish. The dorsal fin is on the back. Medial is in the middle. Lateral is going to be out to the sides. It's just that simple. Superficial is more towards the skin. Deep is farther in. Proximal and distal are in relation to something, okay? So proximal is usually closer, distal is farther. Your wrist is going to be, let me see, easiest way to explain this is your elbow is going to be proximal to your wrist because it's closer toward your midline than your wrist. Okay, so that's your elbow. But your elbow is distal from your shoulder, farther away from the midline from your shoulder. So that's kind of the way it works out there. Okay, I think we covered those guys. Okay. As we move down, we're going to go into our planes and sections. So, our transverse and sagittal, okay, all of those things, We're going to pretty easily. So our sagittal plane is going to pretty much be, mid-sagittal is right in the middle. So sagittal divides you into right and left halves. So mid-sagittal is going to be equal parts right, equal parts left. If something is off to lateral, so it'll be like left lateral to a certain distance sagittal. So that means we'll be dividing you up into, to the left and right halves, but farther off to the side. You sort of understand that one? It's a little unique. Transverse plane is dividing you into superior and inferior, and a frontal plane or a coronal plane is going to cut you this direction, and it's going to divide you more or less into anterior and posterior. These things come into play when we start getting MRIs, ultrasounds, and all those fun things. Let's see. The other fun one is when they start to do what's serial reconstruction. That's fun when they start doing an MRI or a CT, and they do it in certain levels. They cut you up into sections. As you click through those to do the readings, you actually get to watch like the head comes out and the brain grows. You get to see the nose and the eyes get bulgy and everything. So that's serial reconstruction. What they're doing there is they're dividing you into planes. They're dividing you into superior and inferior planes, sagittal planes, or coronal planes. So coronal would be from anterior to posterior, sagittal is going to be right to left, and then we're going to have, the transverse, which is going to be superior and inferior. Okay, body cavity is a cavity, just means a space. So I talked about posterior. So posterior cavity is going to be where your brain and spinal cord, that's your central nervous system. Your central nervous system is just posterior. Anterior is going to be your thorax, which is going to be where our lungs, heart, and all that fun stuff is. Below that, it's going to be our abdominal pelvic. The separation between our thorax and our abdominal region is going to be our diaphragm. So that's going to be the main muscle for breathing. So you can see it right in this area right here. Okay, now we get to where it gets a little more confusing with the body cavities, because in the thoracic cavity, we're going to have our pleural cavity and our pericardial. Pleura is our lungs. Pleura to me always worked out like plural, like more than one. So we have our right lung and our left lung. Our right is going to be 3 sections, 3 lobes. Our left is going to be 2 lobes because we don't have space for our heart. So that is our pleura. So our pleura is going to be our lungs. Pleural cavity is going to be where our lungs are placed. Pericardial, peri in sword fighting is when you actually circle around the sword. So peri to me has always been around. So pericardial cavity is going to be the space that our heart is. Okay. You go to the gym, you do cardio, you go to a cardiologist. So anytime you see cardio, heart. Abdominal cavity, pelvic cavity, actually going to be more in your abdominal area. It's your abdominal pelvic region. It is where our peritoneum is. So you get peritonitis. That's because you're I was on a roll there. So what happens now is your peritoneal cavity, let's say your appendix ruptures, and we get an infection in your peritoneal cavity. Your perineum is the area that separates out. So the anterior from the posterior on the bottom. Peritoneal is going to be part of your abdominal pelvic region. Peritoneum is right there. Your perineal is going to be in the lower regions. Okay. Now I want you to be aware of here is the visceral pleura, parietal pleura. Pleura means lungs. Visceral is going to be attached to the organ, so attached to the lung. Parietal is going to be in the space that the lungs are in. Same thing with pericardial. Your visceral layer of your pericardium, now that's going to be your serous pericardium, because it's filled with serous fluid. Serous fluid is going to be sterile and it's a lubricating. Okay? There's a good picture that I'll explain this to you. So the visceral is going to be attached to the heart, and your parietal, or the pericardium, parietal serous of the pericardium, that is going to be in the space, the cardiac sac, the space that is in your cardiac space. Visceral peritoneum, parietal peritoneum, so your visceral peritoneum is attached onto your digestive organs, and the parietal is going to be just the stuff around the walls of your abdomen. So on this one you can see it. So the visceral layer right here, you have a heart and you shove it in. So you took your hand, your fist, and you shoved it into a balloon. The area that is going to be attached to your hand, is going to touch that, is going to be your visceral. The space between the visceral portion and the outside, so the space right here, I don't know if you can see. Let me see if I can figure out how to draw on this. Okay, so this space right here, this is going to be the outer area. So that space right there is going to be the parietal. Okay, this area right here that's attached, that's going to be your visceral. So this is your visceral, this is your parietal. Is of the heart, so is your cardio. So cardium. Space in between right here is going to be your pericardial cavity. So this right here is your pericardial cavity. This will be the cavity. The space is filled with the serous fluid, so that allows for lubrication. Now, on your posterior, we're going to have our meninges. So we're going to have our dura mater, which is the most durable, the outer area. You can see this right here. It is pretty rough. In between the dura and your pia mater is going to be your arachnoid layer, which is called arachnoid because it's kind of spiderwebby looking. And that's where our cerebral spinal fluid is going to be flowing around. When they do a spinal tap, they have to go through get into the subarachnoid area and pull some stuff out of there, cerebral spinal fluid. Pia mater attaches onto the brain. It's very thin and fragile. You can actually see it right in here. It's kind of like if you were to take a head of cauliflower and some really cheap toilet paper, put that on there and get it wet. That toilet paper now is going to like attach onto the cauliflower and you can't really easily peel that off. You're going to break it. Let's see. Okay, I think we're good here.